Welcome to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Today's date, September 25th, episode 85. In today's podcast, we get into the WNBA and NBA. First, we'll recap the Game 2 wins by both the New York Liberty, who won 91-82 over the Atlanta Dream, completing a 2-0 sweep. And then we'll also talk about the Las Vegas Aces dispatching of the Seattle Storm by a score of 83-76. We'll preview the big semifinal matchup between the Aces and the Liberty, which tips off on Sunday. By the way, I got something to say about the whole WNBA playoff structure. I know you've heard it on the network, but the coach has to give his thoughts. Next, we talked about this last episode. We're going to get into my top 5 in the NBA. So let's start with the premier position with the point guards. I'll give you my top 5 players that are point guards going into the 24-25 season. Last, we continue our previews as we stick in the M's. We'll preview the Miami Heat. We will preview the Milwaukee Bucks. And then lastly, we will preview the Minnesota Timberwolves. And let's get started with today's podcast and discussing the 91-82 win by the New York Liberty last night. New York Liberty were a 12.5-point favorite. The game was relatively close through the half. It was tied, I do believe, at the break, or a short lead. Actually, for the Atlanta Dream was up because they were up by 9 points at the break. The New York Liberty obviously outscoring them by 6 in the third and then 8 in the fourth quarter. And what can you say about the play of Sabrina Ionescu? Sabrina Ionescu, folks, you know, I talked about this on my high five last week when I talked about Sabrina Ionescu being a first-team all-WNBA performer, and she was absolutely fantastic with 36 points and 9 assists, 23 points coming in the second half. And also you have to talk about the play of Double J, Jonquel Jones, 20 points and 13 rebounds for, remember, folks, she was an MVP with the Connecticut Sun. Jonquel Jones at 6'5". You know, we have talked about this a lot on this network about the matchup nightmare that Jonquel Jones presents. And Jonquel Jones, folks, you gotta remember, in game number 1 of the series, she went for 9 points and 7 rebounds. Only took 5 shots. Jonquel Jones, 8 out of 12 from the floor last night. 13 rebounds, limiting Tina Charles, who has been a double-double machine, and kept her at bay. So that's the interesting thing about this series. And really quickly, I want to give my shout-out to 2 particular players from the Atlanta Dream. Number 1, Ryan Howard. Listen, Ryan Howard had an injury midway during the season. That team folded like a cheap suit when she went down, and she got that team to come back up and get them into the playoffs. So Ryan Howard went out with 19 points, and Alicia Gray was absolutely fantastic. 26 points, 10 out of 16 from the floor, 5 out of 8 from the three-point line. Was fantastic and really keeping this game at bay. This game was literally a 1-point game with about 4 minutes up to go, and they ran a great play. We call it the picket fence or the close the elevator play, where you send Ionescu through a double screen, and then you close the elevator doors, and then Ionescu hits a big 3, goes to 5. And there was a point, folks, where I saw the best out of Sabrina Ionescu that I have seen since she came out of Oregon. This is Sabrina Ionescu that I have had the privilege of watching her perform in practice at Oregon during the summer years ago. And I've known Sab a little bit of time. And that is the Sabrina Ionescu that I know is capable of. And it's interesting to note, and we'll talk about this really quickly before we get to game number 2. I got to give Sandy Bordello her props here. Sandy Bordello did something that was very interesting. She went and she put Courtney Vandersloot on the bench. What it allowed them to do is start Liana Fajimic, who is a rookie, but not a regular rookie, folks. She's 24 years old with tons of experience after having a 20-plus point game in game 1. Fajimic went for 9 points and gives them a little bit of length, but then it allows that bench to have a little bit of a floor general in that second unit with Sloot, and which you can also pick Courtney Vandersloot down the stretch of games and move Ionescu to the 2. So I want to make sure I give my props to Sandy Bordello for doing that, because I think that makes that team really, really dangerous with Sabrina Ionescu as a point guard. Remember, folks, I've talked about this. Before there was Caitlin Clark, there was Sabrina Ionescu. And Sabrina got robbed out of her senior year at Oregon because the NCAA canceled, literally during conference tournaments because of the COVID outbreak. And Sabrina Ionescu, who led the nation in triple doubles in her career, would have been at that point, probably would have got a national championship at Oregon. Just want to make sure people understand how great of a player Sabrina Ionescu was at Oregon. And her play really is why I thought she was first team All WNBA and why this team, more than anything else, is the favorite to win a WNBA championship. Remember, folks, they won last night with their best player, arguably the second best player in the world, Breanna Stewart, being pedestrian with 13 points and 6 rebounds. That's a dangerous team, and a dangerous team that's going to try and get their payback in the semifinals versus the Las Vegas Aces. Las Vegas Aces, a team that's been up and down all season, finished off the Seattle Storm with an 83-76 win last night. Gabby Williams, listen, she did a great job with France in the Olympics, and she came over to Seattle, and she was dynamic. She was great in both games of this series. Gabby Williams led the Seattle Storm with 20 points, 5 rebounds, 8 out of 16 from the floor. And Onyeka Onwuemeke, her typical self, did not shoot the ball well in Onyeka, 16 and 10. Over on the other side, unanimous MVP, A'ja Wilson, 24-13, 12 points early in the game to start the game off. But the key last night was Kelsey Plum. Kelsey Plum, who was, dare I say, I'm going to say one of the worst games in her WNBA career. In game number 1, 1 out of 8 from the floor, 0 of 4 from three-point land, 2 points, 2 assists. Well, baby girl went to work last night, 29, 6, and 3. And here's the crazy thing. She went, ready for this? 9 for 9 from 2. She had 29 points, 2 out of 6 from 3, 11 out of 15 from the floor. And when we've talked about this team, right? And I've said this over and over and over again. It's going to be the shooting prowess of Jackie Young. It's going to be the shooting prowess of Kelsey Plum, and it's going to be the overall play of Chelsea Gray. That is going to dictate which Aces team shows up. Well, at least last night, I know they didn't shoot the ball well from 3, the 3 of them, going a combined, I think it was 5 for 16, I think, from 3. Not terrible, but you got to look at the fact that Gray, Plum, Young combined for 50 points. They combined to give 18 assists, and then they combined for 19 rebounds, right? They were around A'ja Wilson. And if you look at the fact that Wilson and Plum combined for 24 out of the 30 points for Las Vegas, they jumped Seattle early, and they maintained it throughout the rest of the game and winning by 7. And that sets up the rematch. Now, this is not the rematch we were expecting now. We were expecting this rematch to be in the finals. And when you look at this series between these two heavyweights, these are at least star power, the two biggest teams in the WNBA. Let's be honest. When you talk about you're going to roll out the ball and you're going to have A'ja Wilson, Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, Courtney Vandersloot, Benajelani Hamilton. You have star power, absolute star power. And let's make sure people understand this. This is a matchup in the regular season that was dominated by the New York Liberty. New York Liberty won all 3 games. 90-82 was the first game that they played in June. In that game, Jonquel Jones was absolutely dynamic with 34 points and 8 rebounds. in the first meeting between these two powerhouses. Game number 2 took place right after the Olympic break, a 79-67 win by the Liberty in Las Vegas, in which, again, this was now Sabrina Ionescu with 23.6 assists, Breanna Stewart with 18 and 7, and then Jonquel Jones, double-double machine, 10.17 rebounds to offset Asia Wilson's 24 and 11. And then the last matchup was the most intriguing one. The last matchup that took place was a 75-71 New York Liberty win, in which Asia Wilson did not play in that matchup, and you had a big game out of Kelsey Plum, 25 points. In that game, Stewie was 21 points, 11 rebounds. Double J, Jonquel, 15 and 8. Ionescu, 14, 4 and 4. So when you start to look at this matchup and you start to say, well, first things first, what do we have here? What are the lines telling us? What is Vegas telling us? Right now, when you look at this series, and I want to make sure I have this right, I don't want to pull this up. The New York Liberty are minus 158 on the money line right now. Vegas Aces are plus 132 on the money line for the New York Liberty to win this series. When you talk about number of games that people expect, no one really knows, right? 3-game series plus 265 on the FanDuel Sportsbook, 4 games at plus 158, 5 games at plus 152. If you start to look at what is the shortest odds to win this series, it is the New York Liberty in 5 games. 3 games to 2 is at plus 330. 3 games to 1 is at plus 360. New York sweep is at plus 380. And then you go the other way. Vegas 3-1 plus 420. Vegas 3-2 plus 430. Vegas 3-0, 11 to 1. So when you look at this series and you talk about the fact, and remember, folks, this is a, once you get to the semifinals, this is best out of 5. Okay, so make sure you understand that best out of 5. Once again, New York Liberty minus 158 on the money line to win the series. Vegas Aces at plus 132. Matt, thanks for getting that up as always. So when you look at this series, what are the key points that I'm looking for as a coach? Number 1 is, like I've talked about, the play of Gray, of Young, and Plum, particularly shooting the ball from 3. The game is going to slow down. Okay, the game is going to slow down, and it's going to be a slower paced game. Even though right now the over/under is at over 162.5, I still like that under. I think this is going to be a drag out kind of series. So Plum, Young, Gray, their perimeter shooting, that's going to be the key. Number 2, the player Breanna Stewart. Breanna Stewart, folks, last year in the WNBA Finals struggled mightily in that series, including a 3 for 17 in the clinching game, the Game 4 win by the Vegas Aces. Can Breanna Stewart shake the bugaboo of the Las Vegas Aces? That's something you got to be worth watching, because if Breanna Stewart has bad games, that's going to put the Liberty in a bad light. Number 3, Fine Bitch. This girl has come along. And if you really look at, because of Cameron Brink being injured and so on and so forth, you could argue that you go Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, probably Rakia Jackson, and then Fine Bitch is in regards to Rookie of the Year. That's how good this girl has been, particularly in the second half. And putting her into the starting lineup gives New York Liberty a little bit more length and athleticism defensively. Got to realize, folks, with Sloot, with Ionescu, not feisty, but not 2 big-time defenders. Fine Bitch being a little bit longer, a little bit more athletic, and obviously younger than Sloot, gives them a little bit more of moxie defensively, bigger, the ability to rebound. But to me, the biggest factor in this series is Jonquel Jones. They have a problem stopping Jonquel Jones. Go look at the tape. She is someone that absolutely torches this team in regards to how they play. You look at those 3 games: the 90-82 win by the Liberty, the 79-67 win by the Liberty, the Liberty 75-71 win at home. And when you start to look at this game right now, Jonquel Jones double-double at plus money has got my attention all over it. Because she is going to try, they're going to try and impose their will, because they're going to look at the matchup of Jonquel versus Kia Stokes or Megan Gustafson, and that's where the Liberty's going to attack. That's what they're going to be looking at. So look at that matchup there. Best bet right now, Jonquel Jones double-double game 1 plus 120. My series thoughts: New York Liberty wins this series in 4 games because of the ability of Jonquel, because of the scoring prowess of Ionescu, and the fact that I talked about this with Kevin Walsh. He agrees with me. The aces just aren't right. Something is amiss. I don't know if it's not having a Candace Parker. I don't know if it's not having enough depth. I don't know if it's the Rika Hamby thing with Becky Hammond. I don't know what it is, but they're not in the right way. Now, they can exercise everything and just beat the Liberty and beat them down, which they have the capability of, but I don't think it's their time. New York Liberty is one of 3 teams in the WNBA that's never won a title. They're also an original franchise. They've never won it. They break through and they get to the finals again. New York Liberty dispatch of the Vegas Aces in 4 games. Let's move on to the NBA and my top 5. See, when I was growing up in the 80s, the center position was a premier position, right? When you had Robinson and Ewing and Olajuwon and Robert Parrish, right? And Bill Lane Beer, and you had Kevin Duckworth, right? You had really premier Brad Doherty, right? You had premier centers all over the league. The premier position in the NBA now is the point guard. And it's different than back then because it's as a scoring guard. So here are my top 5 point guards going into the 24-25 season. And let's start with number 5 at John Morant. A John Morant that's got a lot to prove in the NBA. A John Morant that's got to show that he's got to stay healthy. A John Morant that's got to show that he's got to put away the childness and the foolishness and the guns and the arguing and the fighting and grow up and be the player that we think he can be. For some reason, I believe in this man. And I believe that he's learned his lesson, and I believe that John Morant is going to be so dynamic. That's why I talked about last episode that I thought that the Memphis Grizzlies were going to win their division. I believe in Ja. I believe this will be the redemption story, and I think this will be one of the biggest stories in the NBA this season is that Memphis with Ja, with Bane, with Triple J, with the fact that they have to get Zach Edey. This team will be a force to be reckoned with. They will go over the team total over of wins, and they will win that division. And Ja Morant, we talked about as comeback player of the year. Next, number 4, Jalen Brunson. And I had to take, let me do this right now. I had to take my Knicks glasses off and be objective. Because you know me as a Knicks fan, I was going to think, can I put him 1? I couldn't put him 1. Can I put him 2? Can't put him 2. Can I put him 3? No. But he's the 4th best point guard in the NBA. His ability at 6'1" to play below the rim and not be quick, but be strong, be shifty, and know what to bring to New York. I sat there and I said at one point that Jalen Brunson was the best point guard the Knicks have had since Mark Jackson. And I love Mark Jackson. And I love watching Mark Jackson with the Knicks in the 80s and love them watching at St. John's. This is no disrespect to him. Jalen Brunson is the best point guard since Clyde Frazier. What this guy has done for this franchise, and I've been a long-suffering Knicks fan, What he has done for the Knicks has been absolutely fantastic. He is the number one reason why this team is on the cusp of possibly contending for an NBA championship. It is his play. It is his clutch performance. It's his ability to knock down shots and be a great teammate, take charges, and do whatever he needs. He fits the New York culture 100%. And if this team is going to take that next step and try to contend and win an Eastern Conference title or be an NBA championship, the number one reason why New York will do so is the play of Jalen Brunson. Go mark it down. He will have the stats if he stays healthy and Tibbs doesn't run him into the ground, which is always a possibility. But with Tyler Kohler coming off the bench, with campaign, it should not happen. It probably will. That's what Tibbs does. I get it. Jalen Brunson, the number 4 point guard in the NBA. Number 3, Steph Curry. And folks, this is so close. Like, at all the positions, this is the closest position 1 through 5. Because I could literally, except for Ja at 5, you can mix a lot of these guys up 1 through 4, depending on what you like. Steph Curry's been absolutely fantastic for his entire career. But we're looking at, this is probably the end of the line of the Warrior dynasty. What Steph is going to be able to do is he's going to have to try and carry this team as far as they can. I don't think it's going to be very far. I think there's a real possibility that Golden State either is in a play-in tournament or actually misses the playoffs altogether. But I will say this. This has nothing to do with Steph Curry. Steph Curry will lead the league in threes. He will be top 5 in assists. He will be absolutely dynamic. And Steph Curry made playing below the rim and shooting the ball cool again, right? You think about, like, back in the day it was about dunking, being dynamic. Then it was about AI and the handles or being Vince Carter playing above the rim, right? This guy's below the rim and he shoots it from 40 feet. He makes shooting, as a trainer, he makes shooting fun to teach because everybody wants to be able to knock down shots because of Steph. He will be fantastic. His team will not, but that should not affect his position. Steph Curry, number 3 on the best point guards in the NBA. Number 2, Luka Doncic. This is close, okay? And this is not a disrespect to Luka Doncic, who was absolutely fantastic leading the Dallas Mavericks to the NBA Finals. This is more about the fact of Luka as a two-way player is why Luka's number 2 and not number 1. He's a walking triple-double. He is extremely clutch. He, tries to give it his all every night. But his ability, or actually inability, to lay off the refs and his defensive lapses oftentimes can make problems for Dallas. Because of that, Luka Doncic is number 2. If he laid off the referees and he played offense and defense and played it, like, especially defensively, and didn't miss assignments and miss rotations, and as a coach, I'm not saying this as a gambler, I'm saying as a coach, I watch, he misses defensive assignments. And it's a lot easier to see it with a guard because they're at the point of attack. Luka is not strong defensively. And like I said, he misses assignments. And because of that, I cannot give him the number 1 spot. The number 1 spot for best point guard goes to SGA. I think SGA is going to be the MVP of the NBA this season. SGA can get you 30 points. He can give you 10 assists. He can give you 10 rebounds. And he plays solid defense. He's a good teammate. And Oklahoma City, I do believe, is going, it's either them or Minnesota, they are going to the NBA Finals this year. That team is young. They are hungry. They have it in all different ways. And I just think getting a guy like Caruso and Hartenstein, that just completes that team for me. I think they're going to be absolutely fantastic. And he is the number one reason why. SGA is going into 24-25, my top point guard. Once again, top 5. Number 5, Ja Morant. Number 4, Jalen Brunson. Number 3, Steph Curry. Number 2, Luka Doncic. And number 1, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Let's move on and quickly go through our previews with the NBA, starting with the Miami Heat. A Miami Heat team that we talk about this Heat culture all the time. Miami Heat's win total right now sits at 44.5 games. Their odds to win the South East Division is at plus 160. The odds to win the East is at 20-1. Win the finals is 50-1. Best bet, simply put, look at the division. Who in the hell is competing with Miami? It's Orlando. And Orlando kind of snuck up on everybody last year. And Orlando, in my opinion, obviously overachieved, and they went and got KCP. But this is about Miami. The reason why I think I'm taking Miami is Jimmy got his money. Jimmy wants his money. He wants his money. And Riles ain't going to give it to him. You need to play games. I have a feeling that we're going to get a motivated Jimmy Butler. A Jimmy Butler that when he is on is a top 15 player in this league. I've talked about what I feel about the play of Bam Adebayo, particularly in the Olympics, showing that he could be a stretch 4 and shooting the ball from 3. I think Bam is in that conversation for win Defensive Player of the Year at 17-1. And he won't win Rookie of the Year, but I'm curious about Khalil Ware. I like him next to Bam. Bam's more the big body guy. You could still play him Ware as a weak side 4, like a Jaren Jackson Jr. type, block shots, rebounders. But because of the Heat culture, because of Spoelstra, because of a motivated Jimmy Butler, because of the play of Bam Adebayo, because of, I think Ware's going to be a lot better than people think. I think you look at Terry Rozier will be good for them for the entire year. Tyler Hero for a full season if stays healthy. I can't bet against this team. I know they don't value the regular season at times. They just want to make the playoffs. I think they're going to be better than people think. Best way to do this, Miami Heat plus 160 to win the Southeast Division. Let's move on to the Milwaukee Bucks, who their over-under win totals at 50.5. The under's got the juice at minus 122. Their odds to win the Central Division are minus 120. Their odds to win the Eastern Conference are 7-1, and their odds to win NBA Finals are 12-1. And when you look at this team in the Milwaukee Bucks, the concern over the Milwaukee Bucks, folks, is age. They are an old team. They are getting older, and I don't know how long they can hang on for this. I'm concerned about the age of Brook Lopez. I'm concerned that even though he's at 20-1 to win Rookie of the Year of Bobby Portis. I'm mostly concerned about Glenn Doc Rivers. They're a year older, and I don't know if they're a year wiser. And I do think with what's going on, especially with the tax bills that are coming for them in a small market, I think Brook Lopez is going to be traded at some point. He'll go to a contender and someone will use him down the stretch run because I don't think they're going to re-sign him. And then there's Giannis. Giannis had made some interesting comments. Then they got Dame. Then they turned around and they got the extension. Extensions mean nothing in the NBA to me. Your word does. I am going south on the Milwaukee Bucks. I think the Milwaukee Bucks finish under 50.5 wins. I don't think they win the division. I think that's Cleveland. You guys know how big I am with Kenny Atkinson and what I think he will do with that young roster. I think this is the beginning of the end of Milwaukee. It started last year in the first round loss to the Pacers, and it continues. They will finish under 50.5 wins. They will not win the Central Division. And I think there's going to be a very tumultuous season in Milwaukee. Lopez will be gone. And I think it's going to get really rocky. And I wouldn't be shocked if Giannis asks out by next summer. Last team we'll talk about is the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that was really fantastic, going 56-26 last year. Their over-under win total sits at 52.5 wins. Odds to win the Southwest Division is plus 240. Ask me this, riddle me this. Why are the Minnesota Timberwolves in the Southwest Division if they're in the North? I don't get it. That's a story for another day. The odds to win the Western Conference, 4.5 to 1. Odds to win the championship, 11 to 1. And this becomes an interesting thing because this is the hardest division. Well, I shouldn't say the hardest division. The most top-heavy division in the league. Got to remember, folks, Northwest, I should say. So I was right. I was like, geography, I got that wrong for a second. But when you look at it, Oklahoma City, 57 wins. Denver, 57 wins. Minnesota, 56 wins last year. The over on the win total is 52.5. Why am I not taking the over? I don't think they're going anywhere. Number one, they get to play 10 games against Utah and Portland. They're going to be absolutely awful. They should go 8-1, 8-2, 9-1. They may not lose a game. So I'm high on this team. Why am I high on this team? Anthony Edwards, who to me has, when we do this rankings this upcoming season, will I have Anthony Edwards in my top 10? I did last year. So does he stay in that top 10? Anthony Edwards with MVPs at 14 to 1. That's a sneaky bet. That's a sneaky good bet. Rudy Gobert with Defensive Player of the Year, 12 to 1. Folks, do not touch this at all. Rudy will never win a Defensive Player of the Year again. Wembanyama is probably minus 200 to take it. Go right ahead and take it. Rob Dillingham, Rookie of the Year, 15 to 1. Will be interesting, but I think he comes off the bench. This is going to be something you may want to play, folks, if Connolly gets hurt, because he will go in the starting lineup. The problem with Rob, for what I've been told, is he kind of struggled a little bit in the summer league, moving to the point guard spot. He's not a natural one. So can he figure out the point guard spot? Naz Reid to win Sixth Man of the Year, 6.5 to 1. Yes, please. Naz Reid, pride of Asbury Park. Love what this guy brings to the game as a stretch 4/stretch 5. You can play him next to Cat. You can play him next to Rudy. You can play him without Cat or Rudy and move McDaniels to the 4 and go small ball with a 3-guard lineup, let's say, of Conley and Edwards, and let's say Alexander Walker. He's going to put up stats. He's going to get rebounds. And end the game, Rudy Gobert is not going to be in the game, particularly if they have to score. I am a big fan of this team. I think this team or Oklahoma City goes to the finals. Hint. They're in the same division. So I'm not going to take either one of them. I'm going to just go flat over 52.5 wins for the Minnesota Timberwolves this upcoming season. So really quick with Miami. I think Miami wins the Southeast Division. That's my best bet with them for a team-wide goal. I'm going to go under 50.5 wins for the Milwaukee Bucks. And I'm going to go over 52.5 wins for the Minnesota Timberwolves. This has been episode 85, folks, of the Betting Above the Rim podcast. For all things sports gambling, download that Sports Grid app. Pre-game, in-game, post-game, props, predictions, and more from the very best in the sports gambling industry. Next podcast will be next week. We will continue as we go through our previews. We'll be close to the WNBA finals. We'll kind of look into that. And then, folks, get ready, because next time I'm talking about the New York Knicks. Matt, be ready. It may be an hour. For Matty George, our producer, Vinny, who does a great job with the graphics, thanks for listening, folks. Remember, it's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Good night.